Hi, I'm Laura Zervos, and I'm a registered dietitian and licensed nutritionist. I'm happy to be here with you today. Sorry for the delay, had a little technical difficulty. I don't know if anybody's going to be joining us today, so we'll just get started. And when people join, they could jump right in and feel free to ask any questions. I will have these recipes on the website. And today I've done a lot of the cooking ahead because that's just the nature of our topic today. It's low cost meals. And I also want to throw in the fall element in there too, because most of our things that we're going to be making today are soups and stews and some other root vegetables and things like that that are available to us in the fall. And I just thought it'd be really timely to do that. So let's get started. So cooking on a budget, and that's really important to us today. And who wants to spend more than they have to, right? And prices of food has gone up incredibly this year. So we want to make sure we're getting the most value for our dollar and, maybe use our dollars somewhere else as well. So a couple things that we could do, right? So when we're talking about protein sources, in using lower cost protein sources, you want to think beans, you want to think even quinoa, faro, those things are going to be a little bit higher in protein. Of course, you have vegetarian substitutes like tofu, but again, those could get more costly, but beans are really economical. One thing that we made today was a lentil soup. A bag of lentils used to be a couple years ago, you could get a bag of lentils for $1.50. They have climbed up a little bit. They're about $2.89 for a pound, which still is a good price, right? Because that can make a meal, or it could actually make around 10 to 12 servings. So that's a great option, because the other thing is we're going to use low cost vegetables in that. What are our low cost vegetables? Celery, onions, carrots, turnips, cabbage, beets. All of those are low cost in comparison to some of the fancier ones, broccoli, cauliflower. Cauliflower right now in my area is over $6 per head. So you want to make sure that you're getting the absolute biggest one that you can. So very important to look for those lower cost vegetables. They're just as nutritious. Sometimes they don't get a lot of press. So we're going to look at adding those. And because in addition to using we'll look at some of the lower cost proteins we're going to use, adding some of these other things to the meats that we're going to choose today really extend the meal, right? So it used to be that our focus was that our meat should be the star of the show. So you want to start your thinking of the meat is an accessory, right? So you want to have a lot of fresh vegetables on your plate, a small amount of grains, and a small to moderate amount of protein, small amount of whole grains, and a large amount of vegetables, on our plate to stay healthy. And sometimes that is a big shift in our society. We're always seeing to supersize the protein in a meal to get a double portion. So just something to keep in mind, especially while we're watching cost. So if we choose a lower cost protein and pair it with a lot of vegetables, we'll still be full, right? And we'll still be satisfied, and we'll still be meeting all of our requirements for the day. Very important. And I'm going to repeat. And if you've watched any of these so far, I'm always big on including 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Of course, I always say fresh, and I have some fresh vegetables here too. And then, frozen is always the best after fresh. And then of course, canned. All of them are good. All of them will satisfy your requirements. But of course, fresh is going to have the most nutrients, especially if it's something that's in season, which we always want to get our fruits and vegetables in season. That's when they're even more cost effective. So let's talk first about when we're talking about the the bean family. We made a lentil soup today. So let me grab that. And lentil soup is so easy, especially it used to be that we thought the old way of thinking was, oh, we have to soak our beans, we have to soak our lentils. But we found out that you could do the quick method where you could either boil them in water, for a half hour and then let them sit and then start your recipe. This lentil soup actually calls for just starting the soup with hot water, the lentils, a cup of carrots, a cup of celery, a cup of onions, 12 to 15 cups of water. We're not even using a base here. It gets a lot of flavor from the beans and vegetables. 4 cloves of garlic, high in antioxidants, 1 bay leaf, and you want to take that out before you serve your soup, and a little bit of olive oil. So let me show you what that looks like. And that takes, you're going to cook that for probably, I would bring it to a boil and then cover. If we leave it uncovered, it's going to continue to reduce. So you might even want to put the lid on just so there's a little space on the edge, so it'll reduce a little, but you won't lose all of your soup. You should still, the yield should still be around 14 cups. So let's just try some of that now. And if you think that lentil soup is not something that your family will like, if you think that they will turn their noses at this, there's several things you could do. And let me just adjust the camera so you could see the soup. You could see very colorful. Lentils are an excellent source of iron, very, like I said, very low cost protein. And if you don't think that your kids will be receptive, instead of using the herbs and the spices that I mentioned, instead of the bay leaf and the garlic, obviously salt and pepper, you could try cumin, coriander. You could throw some cilantro in here just to give it a little bit more of a Mexican taste. You could almost serve it like a chili as well. Maybe put some shredded cheese on it, maybe a dollop of sour cream. Cut scallions would make this really nice as well. But this is traditional recipe, and you could serve it with a slice of bread, but it's very hearty. It could stand alone as a meal, and it could also serve as a nice hearty side dish. I like to serve these kind of heavier things, like these heavier sides that are good complex carbs with a light serving of protein. So if I'm serving fish, something that I know that my family's not going to be completely full on, I like to serve a heavier starch side, and this soup does that. This is also something nice to have when you if you get home at the end of the day. It's chilly out, it's definitely hearty. It'll definitely take the edge off of your hunger, and get you settled in for the night. So lentil soup, really good to have around, low cost. And these things, they were, we can't cook these and see them at the same time because these things do take longer. The thing about this could also be done in the crock pot or a slow cooker. And I think you could also do it in an instant pot. I don't have that instant pot recipe, but you could certainly do it in a slow cooker. I would probably go ahead and put my lentils in there, my hot water. This is a large recipe, so you would definitely need a larger crock pot, and just let it go all day. And when you get home, you have a nice meal waiting for you. Some of the other things that we could do when talking about those grains, I had mentioned 2 grains. I had mentioned faro and I had mentioned quinoa. They're both excellent if you haven't tried them yet. Just something different than having rice or pasta. I didn't do that because we're all familiar with rice. We're all familiar with pasta. We had even talked a few times about some of the alternatives to the wheat pastas. We've talked about edamame. We've talked about red lentil and the chickpea pasta, which are excellent alternatives to semolina durum flour pasta. They are gluten-free, they are high in protein and high in fiber. So excellent alternatives. Both quinoa and faro, they call them faro, they call them the ancient grains. But anyhow, both of them for a 1/4 cup serving. The quinoa, I believe, is 170. This is 160 calories. The quinoa only has 29 grams of carb per 1/4 cup. The faro has about 38 grams of carbohydrate, 6 grams of fiber, 3 grams of fiber in our quinoa. So both are very good complex carbohydrate, but calorically dense. So remember, I said 1/4 cup, that is not too much. So you want to make sure that they can be part of your diet, but I would say it depending on your caloric needs, not that you couldn't have more than a 1/4 cup, just to know that that is 1 serving. So let me just show you what these 2 look like. Both are very easy to cook. quinoa, quinoa, you have to, it's more like a rice where you have to have the exact portions of water to quinoa, and then it cooks, and then it cooks for 15 minutes. I believe it's 2 to 1. And then it just gives you this nice fluffiness. And this is excellent. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make a little bowl with this, and we can make the same one with the faro. Here's the faro. Faro cooks a little bit like pasta. You could put 2 cups of it in about maybe 8 cups of water and boil it for 30 minutes. You bring it to a boil, and then it cooks for 30 minutes on a low boil. And then you drain it. So that cooks a little bit differently. This cooks more like pasta. Faro cooks more like pasta. Quinoa cooks more like rice. So all the liquid that you add to this is going to be absorbed. So let's go ahead and make our bowl. I'm just going to do this right here. So I'll do ours with quinoa today. And this is just a little, dish I like to make sometimes. So let's see, that's probably it. We're just gonna do this today. Put about a half cup in there, more. And we're also going to add a little bit of shrimp to this. Now, shrimp is not one of those. It's not always low cost, but you can, especially if you get, if you watch for it, you could get a good deal on it. And that's something that you could keep in the freezer and use as you like. The other thing I like to do, and if you've watched if you've been on any of the classes, we always love to have some roasted peppers. I like to roast red or green peppers, just because they are usually for sale in the summer or late spring. And you will see that you could get a really good deal on them. So if you could get a good deal on them and save them for another time, I think that is always, smart to go. And all I did with these is I roasted them with a little bit of olive oil and kosher salt. And we're just going to put that on the side. And what the result here is a little bit, it's almost like a fried rice. Sometimes I do roasted carrots on these. Sometimes I do, like I said, the peppers or onions. Any of those are really nice tasting. You could do the same thing with the faro. Faro has a really nice bite. It goes really well with vegetables. Like I said, you could add another protein to it, and very satisfying. The next thing that I did was I made the next thing I did was I made a pulled pork. So in addition to the low-cost proteins that we have in the bean family and the legume family, then another way that we could cut costs is to choose less costly cuts of beef, pork, chicken, and fish. So for the pork family, that would be a Boston butt, pork shoulder, anything like that. Of course, you would want to avoid the tenderloin. That's the most expensive cut. But with these other cuts, they will work just fine. Sometimes not so much with this one, but with tougher cuts. Like if we look at beef, if we want to look at a chuck roast, even this one, they're going to cook a lot longer. You're going to use a braising method. Braising is searing in a pan. What you're going to do is you're going to get a cast iron skillet or an enamel cast iron skillet. Add a little bit of some type of fat, whether it's canola oil is pretty good. Also, olive oil will work. You just don't want to get to that smoke point. But anyhow, we would get that nice and hot, and we would put our pork roast in there, our chuck roast, any of those, and get it brown on both sides. It's really important to sear it and get that nice crust on there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to transfer it to either a crock pot or a Dutch oven. I like to use a Dutch oven on the stove, especially if I'm home. I just like the way that heats, but they both do a really nice job. So what you're going to do is after you brown your meat on both sides, you transfer, and then we add a liquid. Very important that that liquid contains some type of acid. I thought I had one here before class, but I did not. Tomato paste is an excellent one. a little bit of vinegar if you're first cooking your pork roast or something, or short ribs, baby back ribs in the oven. You could always add a little bit of vinegar to that. It really helps break down that connective tissue and give you a really tender product. And you could use other liquid as well. You could use tomato paste and beef broth, or any kind of broth with that, chicken broth, even water, and with lots of vegetables, anything like that, we could serve it up. So I just wanted to tell you about the pork. I did a pork Boston butt, and typically I would do pulled pork. Sometimes I don't pull all the pork. Sometimes I leave it in chunks. Some people in my family don't like it all picked apart. They just want to have a nice side of meat. But what you could do is pull it apart. You could put it on a sandwich, add a little bit of barbecue sauce. I rarely cook my pulled pork in a barbecue sauce. I prefer to add it afterwards. It adds a lot of sugar. So in fact, I like to make my own barbecue sauce so I can control the amount of sugar that is actually in there. But there's other things that we could do with this as well. A lot of variation. We could take some and actually put it on our faro or our quinoa. We could put it on a bed of lettuce. But what I'm going to do two things today. I'm going to take some carb balanced tortillas. And when they say carb balanced, it just means that there is a good amount of fiber in there, so much so that the net carb is very close to zero. So we're going to look at these ones. There's many different excellent brands out there. This is one particular brand, and one tortilla is 70 calories, 18 grams of carb, and 15 grams of dietary fiber. What does that mean? It means only 3 grams of net carbs. So it's an excellent choice to have a carb balanced meal. So anyhow, let's take that. And let me just adjust the camera here. And here is my pulled pork, or I should say my pork Boston butt. And I'm going to leave it whole. I'm not going to shred it. And you see how tender that is. And you want to make sure that you pull the fat. And I do like to do this ahead of time, because you will get the fat. It's easier to separate the fat. So there we go. Oops. And again, we could just add lettuce, tomato, onion. And then one thing that I'd like to point out too, one thing that I like to do often is, this is another way to save cost, is I like to shred my own cheese. Now, when you buy shredded cheese that comes in a plastic bag, right? Sometimes it contains a lot of additives to keep it from clumping together. Sometimes silicon dioxide, sometimes. So if we don't want those things, and sometimes the more processed thing is, the more somebody touches this block of cheese, the more the cost goes up, correct? So if we buy this in this state versus buying cubes of cheese, which are convenient, very nice to see the cubes of cheese. If you're in a hurry or something like that, you could certainly do that. But this is going to be your most cost effective. I could still cut this in cubes. I could still grate it. So what I've done though, is I like to I have a nice little grater, and I just grate it fresh, wrap it up real nicely. It'll last just as long. And I know that this is just 100% cheese, no funny business. So I'm not giving my family any additives. So I'll just go ahead and shred that on there. The other thing, and look how nice it shreds too. And you could use different. So I like to do a small shred, but you could certainly do a larger one as well. Just whatever your preference is. I also do that with my Parmesan cheese. I do it with mozzarella cheese. I just like to grate it myself. And like I said, there's no funny business. And the other thing is, what we do is we wrap this up really well, because as you could see, this is all the surface area is exposed, right? So if this were to have like a protective skin on it, I would leave that on so we have the least amount exposed here. But anyhow, we'll just wrap this right up. We could put anything on here. We could also, instead, we could put this on a pita. We could put our pork on a pita and make a little gyro. Thought I had some pita bread around here, and put some tzatziki sauce sauce or some Greek yogurt on there for a real nice treat. The other thing that we could do with the pulled pork, we could make the gyros. We could make a quesadilla. I could take 2 of these. Let's do something different. I like to do these a lot for my family. Everybody loves these. It's just an alternative to grilled cheese that's a little less filling. You get 2 of these out of here. So you need 2 tortillas. And let me get my pork. We'll just put it on here, just pull it apart. So much you could do once you have this protein done. And this is relatively inexpensive. And because you do have to, you have to cook it, you do have to remove the fat. This is also fun to do for nachos. If you're having a party, you could make pulled pork nachos. It just depends if this is more cost effective or ground beef is more cost effective, and depending on what your budget is. So then after that, we can take our cheese and just grate it real nicely here. Okay. And we'll just spread it on like so. And then at this point, if you like, I like to add jalapenos. Sometimes my kids want green chilies on here, and then we just cover it with our top tortilla. And then we'll just put this in a pan, or I'll put it on my griddle that's been greased, flip it over and just open it up. Oh my goodness, it's such a wonderful treat. We have these a lot. In fact, maybe we'll throw this on before class is over just to see how nice that'll be. It's an excellent appetizer. If I'm having people over for like a Mexican dinner and we're having tacos or fajitas, I will always make a lot of those and cut them up, and it's a great appetizer. You could serve it with sour cream, guacamole. And speaking of guacamole, avocados, really expensive, right? Sometimes before they're in season, they could be as much as $3 a piece. Sometimes they're 2 for $3. The last time I was at the store, they were $1 a piece. So you could imagine I scooped up a bunch of them. But what I like to do then is to take my avocado, because I don't know if I could eat 10 at one time, or 10 within the week. And avocados have a very short ripeness period. Once you get it home from the store, you want to squeeze it and see if if it gives a little bit. If it does, it's ready to go. At that point, I like to cut it open, take out the insides, smash it up, put some lemon juice on it, and freeze it. And then it's ready for avocado toast. It's ready for guacamole or whatever you would like to have. So take advantage of things like that. The other thing, very similar to that, is green beans. Now, these are green beans from my garden. If you don't have a garden, that's fine. But what I'm going to do with these, and what I'll show you what I've done with them, is that I will blanch them. I also, if you can get to a farmer's market or you have a farm market near you, it's a good idea to get these now. Right now, they're very inexpensive. I want to say less than $1 a pound. And what you can do is get a large amount like that, and then blanch them, and then put them in a freezer bag. I do this all the time, and then I take these out in the winter, and we have fresh green beans. So it's just a way to preserve them, put some aside, and much more cost effective than buying them from the grocery store. Another thing I like to take advantage of too, and I'm gonna have to get these back in the freezer. I don't know if you could see these really well. These are blueberries, same thing. When they're on sale at the grocery store, I like to buy them then, rinse them off, make sure they're nice and clean, and make sure they're dry. And then I set them on a baking sheet with parchment paper and just put them in the freezer for a little bit, let them get a little bit crystallized, and then I put them in the bag so they don't clump together. So let me get those back in the freezer so I don't ruin them. And then along those lines, I also do that with bananas. So once my bananas start to turn, if I don't think I'm going to eat them all, I'll freeze them. I can't make banana bread all the time. But that's also a nice option to do with our ripe bananas. But what I like to do is freeze them. Then I still have them if I want to throw them into a smoothie, or if I still want to make that banana bread, I still have them ready to go. So that's a great option. Another thing that I like to freeze are my herbs. So like I said, if you don't have a garden, not a big deal, but you could buy parsley, basil when it's like it's smell is just taking this out of here. What I like to do is cut it from the garden, wash it, and then let it dry really well. Sometimes I hang it and let it dry, and we've talked about that before. We've looked at that. Also, what I'll do is I'll put it in the food processor, and I just put it in 3 tablespoon clumps. That's all grated, and wrap it up real nicely in some plastic wrap, and then put it into a plastic bag. And then of course I have to write on it, because once you get several in there, you're not going to know. But that's a great way. If you're buying an herb from the grocery store, maybe you need dill for a recipe or basil or something like that. And those packages at the store could be very expensive. So use whatever you're going to use, and then immediately chop it, clean it, chop it, and get it in the freezer. That way it'll be fresh and ready for you to go the next time. It's nothing worse than throwing something so expensive away. So we have that. And then of course I do it with parsley. I also do that with scallions. Anything that I have and I'm worried about if it's going to spoil for me, throw it in the freezer. It's a great way to preserve it. And then it's ready to go. I am actually, for our lentil soup, I wanted to mention it calls for 6 tomatoes in the recipe as well. And I like to use, of course, I'll use tomatoes from the garden. If I don't have those, if you don't have a garden, you could always use tomatoes from the store or your farmer's market, and cut them up as well. Put them on a sheet pan and stick them in the freezer. Let them crystallize over, and then stick them in a plastic bag. And I just used my last ones today for our lentil soup, so I'll be freezing more tomatoes this week. In addition to canning them, it's nice to have some frozen ones on hand, and you could just put them into your chili, a soup, a stew, anything like that. They'll be a real nice quality product for us. Let me get these back in the freezer. Okay, so we said that a couple things we could do in addition to having meatless proteins like the legume family. Then we would choose lower cost cuts of meat that might be more fatty, or not the prime one that everybody else wants. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So you always see chicken breast. Everybody wants to have chicken breast, but also the legs and the thighs are also excellent options as well. So again, you want to make sure that since they do have a higher fat content, that maybe you want to keep that portion, but we could still have a chicken thigh or a chicken leg. It's still a good source of protein. So what I've done is I took, and I will get my spoon here. So we have some chicken legs I did today, and potatoes. And I took them and you could see how nice and juicy they are, and nice and brown. So what it was is I take either chicken thighs or chicken legs, and this makes a really nice, inexpensive dish. Very hearty, very filling, very comforting, real nice comfort food. And we take our chicken thighs and we put them in a 9 by 13 baking dish, probably about 4 potatoes, 4 cloves of garlic, kosher salt, fresh ground black pepper, probably a tablespoon or 2 of oregano, and then 1/3 cup of olive oil, a 1/3 cup of water, and a 1/3 cup of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And it just makes a nice meal. And this I like to make on weeknights. Sometimes I will make this in the morning without cooking it. I'll just put everything in the pan, and then whoever is home first that evening can pour over the juice and stick it in the oven, and it cooks for approximately 45 minutes to an hour covered with foil, and then another 45 minutes to an hour uncovered, so it gets this nice and brown. Once it gets brown, your potatoes get brown. Oh my goodness, there's nothing better. A nice hearty meal, very inexpensive, and it goes a long way. So, and even though I'm using, even though I'm using a cut of meat that is higher in fat, I am taking the skin off. And that's important to note that with the olive oil, the water, and the lemon juice keeps it very nice and moist while still getting that brown flavor. So let me set those aside. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, we talked about the pork, about the chicken, and overhead that roast, shoulder roast, also round steak, sirloin. All of those are very lean cuts, but they need to be cooked with probably, braising is good for them because it'll keep them nice and moist. So what we'll do is we will braise them in a fat, and then we will cook them for a longer period of time in a liquid. And again, that liquid should contain an acid. We had in the marinade, we had lemon juice. You could also have tomato paste. If you have a fattier cut of meat, like a round steak that you wanted to quickly fry or saute, I would recommend we could tenderize things with the acid, like I said, in the marinade. The other thing that we could do is we could mechanically tenderize that. And how does that work? Well, we take our mallet and we pound the meat until it's flatter. That's how to mechanically do it. That's done with veal. You could do it with chicken. You could do it with chicken breasts, boneless chicken breasts to flatten them. You could also use it on round steak, on a sirloin steak, just to tenderize it, because they could be very tough if they're cooked quickly. If you're cooking them for a long time, they have enough time to get tender if you have that liquid and you use the proper cooking method. So what else did I want to show you today? So we have we have the chicken, we have our pork, we have the beef. Next, we'll move on to fish. So there are many low cost alternatives to fish. And like we said, when we make that sacrifice with the chicken, the pork, and the beef, we're going with fattier cuts. So we have to watch how we cook it. We have to watch our portion. Fish is obviously lean, and we don't need to worry about that. So how do we get a lower cost fish item? Basically, you could look for the sales, and that's a good time to do it. Certain times of the year that they put fish on sale more. If you are a frequent shopper and you go to your grocery store more often, you could take advantage of those specials. Sometimes if you're open to something, if you go into the grocery store and you don't have a plan, which I don't always recommend, but if you happen to have one of those days where you're open to buying what is ever on sale, we definitely take a look at the fish. It could be just recently marked down for some reason. Maybe that's the last day it needs to go. That just happened to me when I was at the store last week. I didn't have a plan, and they happened to have several things marked down. One, they had marked down strip steaks, so I was open to that. But I usually like to go. Anybody that knows me, and we do several classes on menu planning and meal prep, knows that I always usually I always have a plan on what I would like to cook and buy at the grocery store. But it's good to be a little flexible as well. So for salmon, I like this particular brand. It's from a warehouse club. I like it because it's wild salmon. It's cost effective to get it in the can. Fresh caught wild salmon is very difficult to find. You can't get it year round. It's very expensive, but this canned option is a really excellent alternative. And it has a long shelf life. And just if you could use it, anything you would use salmon for. I like to make salmon patties. I like to do, what else will I do? That's pretty much the biggest thing I do with the canned salmon. But it's nice to have around. It makes a really quick meal. Another thing that you could do is tuna. And again, I would watch for it on sale. The pouches of tuna, I like to avoid the ones that already have flavoring on them, because sometimes that is extra and unnecessary sodium, and we're trying to look for something cost effective. So again, the more processed something gets, the more costly it gets too. So if we buy a larger can of tuna, we could make tuna salad, you could make a tuna casserole. We could just have, my family likes to just have a different kind of tuna salad that we make that has black olives, artichokes, lemon, and it's all chopped up together, and we have that on a salad with a lemon vinaigrette. That's very tasty. So just, it's an excellent source of protein. Again, a nice long shelf life. I want to say this says this is like 3 years you have on this. So if you can't use this can of tuna in 3 years, I don't know what to tell you, but there's many recipes out there. I'm going to put a recipe on there for a really healthy tuna salad. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So let me put that down. And okay, in addition to grating our own cheese, again, we want to talk about those low cost vegetables. And sometimes people forget about them because they don't get the press that kale and broccoli and spinach and some of these other ones do. But cabbage is one of those year-round vegetables that is very low in cost, that you could do so much with. And we did on our last class, we did the cabbage steaks, which are really nice. And we sliced our cabbage lengthwise, and we put it on parchment paper with olive oil, kosher salt, and crushed black pepper. And we roasted it, and we put a garlic tahini sauce on it. That's a lovely option. But in addition to having the faro and the quinoa as a base, we could also have a vegetable as a base. So in this one, I just braised cabbage, but we could put any of the meats that we had talked about with this. We could have that nice side of cabbage. We could put it with the pulled pork. We could put it with the beef. We could put it with the chicken, something very low cost and something very filling, high in fiber, that when we cut down that size on the serving of protein, we'll also have this nice serving of vegetables. So that is nice to have on hand. And again, we had said that, excuse me, the green beans, of course, fresh from the garden or from the farmer's market is best. Frozen would be second. Lastly, though, we have canned. And I get this question all the time in my practice. What about canned vegetables? And I think canned are a great alternative. They're low in cost, long shelf life. And if the other ones aren't available to you at any time for whatever reason, maybe you can't get to the store to get fresh. Maybe they don't have them. Maybe they're out of them. This last year, we've had a lot of shortages. So if that's the case, canned are certainly a great alternative. You have to watch if you have a sodium issue. Sometimes some of them have a higher sodium content. Two things you could do: you could either buy a low sodium version, or you could rinse them yourself with some water to try to get some of that off of there. But remember, if you're eating mostly food cooked from home, and you're not cooking foods from a box, if you're using fresh whole foods, and if you have in this serving of green beans, it's 1/2 cup serving is saying 300 and that's saying undrained. So if you drain it, it's saying 200 milligrams of sodium. And remember, the recommendation for sodium is 2,300 milligrams. So it can be part of a healthy diet. But a lot of people think that they can never have canned again. You can just watch your serving size. And if you're eating a healthy diet, if you're eating a lot of foods from home, prepared from home, whole foods that do not come out of a box, that aren't mostly prepared for you, you should be fine. So you might want to even try, if you're concerned, you could always, keep a little record of how much you're having and see if you're anywhere near that 2,300. If you are doing some of the things that I mentioned, you're not. Now, if you're eating out several times a week, you might be getting that. We know if we go to a fast food restaurant, but it doesn't have to be fast food. We know if we dine out, we're going to get 30% more sodium, saturated fat, and calories. And that's not just not the fast food restaurants. That's nicer restaurants as well, right? Because sodium enhances the flavor. So you'll see that they're all higher in sodium. And I have that in practice all the time. I'll have people come once they're starting to watch their intake really closely, and they're cooking from home, and they're taking more meals from home, and they'll notice when they go out, even to a better restaurant, that it's very high. They could taste the sodium, and I heard that all the time. Wow, they put a lot of salt on their, name it, their broccoli, their chicken, whatever it is, mashed potatoes, anything like that. So good to keep that in mind, that the more we eat at home, that sodium level should be in check. So while we have a little bit of time, I'm going to go ahead and cook that quesadilla just to give you an idea. Let's get out our skillet here, and I'm just going to add a little bit of a cooking spray on here so it doesn't stick. And we'll just put it on real low while we're talking, just so we could see what that looks like inside. Get a little bit warm first. So those are some of the things, and other things that we could do with our pulled pork. You could make pulled pork sliders, nachos, gyros, quesadillas. It could be put on a salad. The same with any kind of beef that you would cook the same way, like if you were to do a chuck roast or something like that. The other thing I'd like to mention is, yes, that we had talked about using these cuts of chicken, the chicken legs and chicken thighs. So let's talk about buying chicken. So if you're able to, it's a good idea. And we used to do this all the time when I was growing up. We always bought a whole chicken, and we cut it in half and then cut off the pieces, and then we would begin to prepare it from there. We never bought thighs, legs, breasts, and you see so much more of that. And again, so we start with the whole chicken. Anytime somebody touches it, it gets more costly, correct? So once we cut that into breasts or thighs or legs, the price goes up a little bit from just having that whole chicken. Then we talk about taking the skin off, okay? So we add another layer of cost. Then if we remove the bones, you'll see many times bone, obviously, you see a lot of boneless chicken breasts, but now many times it's difficult to buy thighs that have the bone in. You see a lot of boneless chicken thighs. So this chicken dish I made today is made with just the drumstick part of the whole leg. But if I do like to have the bone in there, and I like to have the bone in when I'm making the thighs as well, because that is where all the flavor is, right? If I wanted to make a soup or a stock, if you have to have the bones, because that's where all the good stuff is. And that's where you get all the collagen as well. Okay, so our skillet's ready. I'm just gonna slip this in here, and I just have a small one, so hopefully that'll turn out okay for us. Oh, and here's my pita pockets that I was looking for before. So let's do one of those while we have a chance. And again, if you have any questions, but yes, I think it's a good idea. If you can, a whole chicken is significantly less expensive per pound. Now, of course, there's going to be waste, but it's still less per pound to buy that. So I'm going to take my fork, and we'll just make this a gyro. But this is just so versatile, and this is something that could be thrown into a slow cooker. It could be thrown into a Dutch oven, and give it a couple of stirs here and there, and that's all you need to do. So we're just going to put some pork. We'll put our lettuce, and we're also going to put a little bit of Greek yogurt right on there, since I don't have any tzatziki on hand, but still, just put some Greek yogurt. And then we just have our sandwich just like that. So we have the pulled pork, the lettuce. We could add tomato and onion to this. So just many options that you could do with that. And what else did I want to talk about? Let's get our. Just get this up here. I used a really small skillet, so I'm not even going to attempt to get a spatula in there. Just flipped it over with my hand, so just be careful when you do that. So other things, other ways to take advantage of cost. So batch cooking always helps to as well. And when I talked about before about going to the store without a list, the main reason you want to have a list, you know, with meal prep and menu planning is to, if you come up, if you sit down with your family and you make that big list of everything that everybody likes, that you know, all the pork dishes that they like just we said here, all the chicken dishes, all the beef dishes, all the fish dishes, all the vegetarian dishes, all the egg dishes, all of the salad dishes, all of the breakfast for dinner dishes. So think about it, we all get stuck in that 7-meal rotation, right? So if you think about some of those things and what days of the week you want to have them, and if we know that we're having chicken thighs one day and salmon the next, and let's see, beef the next day, and maybe a pasta dish the fourth day, and maybe tacos on that last day, or chicken fajitas, so that we'll know we need to get. After we do that, don't simply write down that we're going to have meat loaf or we're going to have roast chicken. Write down roast chicken. What are the vegetables that you want to have? So also, in addition to having your family list everything that they like protein wise, have them list all the vegetables that they like as well and all the starches. And then, you know, keep those menus, the principles of good meal planning in mind. You know, what would complement this in color, texture, flavor, etc. And we're probably good to go. Let's just take a peek to see if our cheese is melted. Oh, and it is. It is. Okay. So with menu planning, go ahead and say that, yes, I'm going to have roast chicken and then the chili and the fish and everything else. And then the day that I'm having salmon, I'm having green beans. The day that I'm having roast chicken, I'm having Brussels sprouts. The day that I'm having steak, I'm having roasted carrots. So you have, when you make your list, you could add all of those meats. If you don't have, you know, check your freezer first, see if you have any of those things, pull them if you do have them on hand, add them to your list if you don't. Go to your refrigerator. Like I said, roast carrots, you probably have carrots on hand because those are one of the ones that we always keep around. But the green beans, the broccoli, if you don't have them on hand, add them to your list. When you get home, make sure, you know, stick to that menu. Sometimes if you don't stick to the menu, that broccoli or the cauliflower is going to go bad in there, the cabbage, you know, and then you're going to throw that away. And then even if it's a low cost vegetable, it's throwing money, you know, in the garbage, which nobody wants to do. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my old pork quesadilla. Again, we made this on a nice carb balanced whole grain tortilla, so it's very good for us. Just like to, I got into the habit of cutting very small portions for my family, and it just kind of stuck. I guess since when they were kids, I would cut small pieces of pizza, small pieces of quesadilla, a grilled cheese in quarters, and that just has kind of stuck with us. So just do keep that in mind. So I always like to do that. So there we have our quesadilla. Just a nice addition to have. And like I said, it's a good appetizer. We could put our Greek yogurt on it, or sour cream and scallions and onions, whatever you would like. So in addition, we were talking about getting our, you know, sticking to the grocery list. The other thing too that you want to do, if you see that maybe something happened, maybe you were supposed to have broccoli on Tuesday, but somebody got home from work late, or there was an unexpected meeting and those plans didn't stick. So we're left with this broccoli left over. I would recommend cooking it. cook it, and then you could just grab it for lunches or grab it for another time. You don't want it to go bad. It's going to go bad quicker if it's not cooked in the refrigerator. If you cook it, you will stop that aging process, and it should last a little bit longer. If you cooked it and put it away right away and took care of it and put it in the refrigerator, it should last longer. So that is just something to keep in mind. I always like to do that. You know, if I had bought a lot of vegetables, I will tend to cook a lot like that Sunday or right when I get them home, just so they stay nice for me. Then during the week, it's just real easy to get those 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day if they're already prepped and cooked, and you could just add a serving to whatever you're doing. What else did we want to mention today? We talked about using, you know, you want to use the non-protein, the non-animal sources of proteins like the beans and legumes. We want to use the lower cost meats. We could use lower cost meats if we either use a marinade or mechanical method, or we use the proper cooking method to make them tender. We want to add lots of vegetables to add bulk to that meal, and to obviously satiate us. We just don't want to cut our portion size down, right? While we want to make sure we're getting enough protein, and most people are getting enough protein, and the recommendation for protein is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So, you know, for a woman that weighs, you know, 130 pounds, that might look like 45 to 47 grams of protein. So it just depends, you know, where your protein needs are. Many people exceed that. So, you know, remember 1 ounce of pork, chicken, beef, and fish all contain around 7 grams per ounce. So it's not that hard to get it. You know, a cup of Greek yogurt. Let's see, this Greek yogurt here, it is 3/4 cup, and that gives us 17 grams. So not too hard to get that protein requirement in. What is hard is to get the fiber requirement in, which is 25 to 35 grams per day. But eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, having whole grains like quinoa, faro, whole wheat, carb balanced tortillas, cabbage, red peppers, green beans, potatoes, we're going to meet that. So just try to keep those things in mind. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is when we are having tuna, we could also put some, you know, there's low cost vegetables that go with that too, to make a tuna salad. So onions, celery, green pepper, whatever you like to do. So by choosing the cuts of meat, choosing our cooking methods, choosing the right proteins, soups and stews, making that meat not the star of the show, but, you know, supporting cast, make vegetables the star, have your serving of meat in there. And that's just another way to watch your dollars. Again, always stick to your list. You'll be surprised if you do use that method where you plan out all 5 days, and you have not only the protein, but the starch and the vegetable on there. And like I said, you check your freezer, check your refrigerator, check your pantry. Do I have rice on hand if I'm making stuffed peppers? Do I have salt? Do I have soy sauce? Do I have all of those ingredients? Make sure you have everything and stick to your list. Remember, if we shop around the outside of the store, that's where all of the fresh fruits and vegetables are, our produce, the dairy, whole grains, proteins, eggs, cheese. The inside of the store is where you're going to find a lot of processed foods. It's not always. I mean, you still can find, that's where we find our tuna. That's where we find some canned vegetables. That's where we find the bags of rice and the bags of beans. And that's where we're going to find our quinoa. So those are good sources too, but you just have to be careful because you may be tempted to buy like a rice that's already seasoned. You know, there's certain brands that they come, you just have to add water and they have a seasoning packet. And we know that we can make those all, and then we have more control over what's in our food. Just like we were talking about with the cheese, if we grate it ourselves, we know that this is 100% cheese, no funny business. And it will last just as long. And that did not take us long at all to grate that cheese, even if we were doing it for a whole family. It's not going to take that long. If somebody could do it while you're setting the table. So, and the other thing that you could do, if you know that you're having this tomorrow or you're having it tonight, you could always do it ahead of time. I wouldn't recommend doing it too far ahead of time, because what are we doing? We're increasing surface area. There's all these little shreds, and that's when it's more susceptible to spoilage. So just something to keep in mind there. We made our shrimp bowl, and we have our chicken. And with just wanted to say one more thing about meal prep and planning, sticking to our list, staying away from impulse buys. And always, if you go to a grocery store where it has the price per ounce, if you look at a large can of green beans versus a smaller brand can of green beans, or brand among the brand. You know, the store brand isn't always less expensive. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But see if they have the price per ounce, and compare the price per ounce, because you can't compare what a 16-ounce can compares to a 12-ounce or 14-ounce. You need to know the price per ounce. How do we do that? Well, we usually have our devices on us, so we could always pull out that calculator and take the total price. If it's $3.99 divided by, always take the price divided by the ounces to get the price per ounce, or the price per pound, or whatever we're looking to do. And again, if it's each, we want to look for the biggest one, right? If the cauliflower that I bought this past week was $5.99 each for one head. So I made sure that I got the biggest head of cauliflower I could find, without any blemishes, of course, and bought that. Now, if something is per pound, different store, you have to decide how many you want. Maybe, you know, there's some things too that, you know, it's tricky when you look at cherries or something like that. They'll say $2.99, and they'll say underneath per pound, or $4.99. I just did that with asparagus with a couple years ago. It said $3.99, and I assumed it was $3.99 a bunch. When I got up to the register, it was $3.99 a pound. In fact, I was buying $10 worth of asparagus, so I politely put that back. So it's good to know the prices. Know, you know, of course, if you know specials in the store, sometimes it's not cost effective to drive to several stores with the price of gas. Some people get their groceries delivered. If you could do that, and there's not surcharges and tips and things like that, you have to weigh all of those and what's best for you and your family, and how you want to spend your food dollars. Again, today, I believe in 2020, more Americans spend their food dollars on food eaten outside of the home. So you want to make sure, as prices go up, maybe that you want to spend your food dollars elsewhere and have just as good a quality of food at home. So absolutely doable. It just takes little planning and preparation. Thank you so much. I will post the recipes for the chicken and potatoes, the lentil soup, how to make a quinoa bowl, and just some variations for the pulled pork. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. It was great to be with you. Again, Laura Zervos Food Nutrition Services, registered dietitian, licensed nutritionist. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.